Welcome to BS Friday. We are coming to you live from the Building Science Symposium, and we got a special show for you today. We're bringing you behind the scenes for a roundtable event with
Ben Bogie, Patrick, Stephen, Jake. It's the A Symposium, but I think it's the first roundtable ever recorded.
Yeah, I think it is the first roundtable ever recorded. So, yeah, we got Jake Bruton, Patrick McCombe from Fine Home Building is going to be up there with us. Stephen Baczek is up there with us. And who am I missing?
Ben Bogie.
Ben Bogie with the beard. So we wanted to let you know this was really an exciting conversation, a whole ton on workforce development.
Yeah. So check out the conversation. Throw in your comments. Say hello to Ben, Stephen, Patrick, and Jake. And, man, next month, more exciting shows, Dave.
More exciting shows, and we're going to be on the road in Europe. So we'll have fun. And Mark and I recorded a bunch of stuff we'll be dropping every Friday for all of you out there. So, hey, everybody. Tell them, Mark. Tell them to enjoy this roundtable.
Enjoy the roundtable, and thanks for joining BS Friday Live.
Yeah, can't do it without all of you. Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here.
Hello, 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 everybody. Thank you, Patrick.
That worked. That never works. How did that work?
It did work. All right, well, listen, first of all, I think we want to thank everybody that has shown up to today's event. So all these events don't happen unless people get involved. And that includes everybody in the audience, to include all of these fine folks that are sitting up here as well. I also want to give a big round of applause to the folks that are putting this on. Travis, Brungardt, and Joe, where are you guys at? Can we give them a round of applause?
Cheryl Lewis,
and
the brains of the operation.
100%. Cheryl Lewis is in the back there. It takes a lot of people to make these things happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a roundtable event. That means all of you out there can ask your questions to any of the panelists up here, and hopefully they'll have a good answer for you. If they don't, or a bad answer. If they have a bad answer, we have cups of water up here to dump on them. So, but we'll have fun. And up here with me also is Patrick McCombe. If people do not know Patrick from Fine Home Building, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are?
Hey, y'all. Let's not talk about me. I want to thank you all for being here and supporting the interests of better building, because God knows we need better buildings in this country for so many reasons. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. All right, who's going to be the first one in the audience brave enough to kick us off for today's event? Let's see somebody.
I'd like to know who you are.
Oh, you want to know who I am? Oh, well, I'm kind of like Patrick. My name is Dave Cooper from Dave Cooper Live. And we host a live show where we travel the world showcasing innovation in construction. So we showcase the people, the process, and the products around the world, to include all of these people up here. We can build better, we need to build better, and that's why these events are happening. So thank you for that. All right, first question. I saw somebody over here in the corner who had their hand up. Go ahead. Let me ask.
At what point do the energy savings from efficiency and operational, in the operational period of a building, at what point does that intersect with the embodied energy of the materials it took to get there?
So
as in, if there were a payback period on carbon, where does that live for you guys?
Are you ready?
That is a really, really deep question.
Are you ready for the eponymous building science answer? It depends. And I'm dead serious here, because this depends on like the scale of the project, the massing of the building, the materials choices in the building, the distance from distribution of the materials for the building, the choice of the heating and cooling systems for the building. So it's...
Can I give the short answer?
Yes.
What the client wants is what you do. You make the building that they want, and you try and make it as minimally energy and carbon intensive on the in and out of it because you can. And that's going to vary, right?
If you don't mind, I'm going to elaborate on that, because I just answered a question similar this past week. You know, the thing that I like to portray is The minute we choose to build, we're in debt to the planet, right? Nothing we do after we choose to build is gonna make us positive. So the question is, what's the least amount of debt I want to put on the planet when I build something, right? Because we're never going to get positive. It's always a negative number. Doesn't matter. So yeah, you could talk about embodied energy. You could talk about all these things, but the reality is that it's partially what Patrick said. I agree with that, but I think it's a slightly expanded. I know you were given the short answer, but there's what's available, what the client wants, what the budget holds, what the builder's familiar to doing as the architect, what am I familiar with? All these variables kind of knit that quilt of a project. And as the architect in my projects, I'm just looking to minimize the amount of debt that we're putting on the planet.
So I just want to expand on this a little bit more so that everybody has an honest footing to look at this from. So the term carbon footprint is something that was given to us by the oil and gas industry in order to shirk their responsibility onto the common man and get us to be the ones to carry the burden of all this climate disaster that's happening. So if we want to have a real impact, what we need to do is start lobbying and vying for these companies that are causing the damage to the planet to be the ones that are held responsible for it. But since I hate government and I hate lobbying and I have no skills in that department, what I'm going to do is try and choose the least bad materials at the moment, given the project specifics. Because the reality is, like Steve said, we're never going to build our way out of this problem. And the reality is that the impact that this group is going to have on the embodied energy or operational energy isn't even a drop in the bucket. But I'd like to think that we can set the stage so if there is a paradigm shift and we have better energy sources, then future generations have a precedent that's been set by the work that we've done.
And I think we should add that building durable buildings is always better than building junk, right? So we should always be striving to have our buildings last as long as reasonable.
So I believe they say the most sustainable building is the one that doesn't have to be built again, right? That's kind of what we're looking at. Awesome. Thanks for that question. Who else has a question out here? Anybody? There you go.
At what point does it make sense to couple the slab to the ground for thermal? And I guess that would be like, what zone would you couple the slab to thermal? And if not, then how much insulation should go under a slab? Say a finished basement or a slab on grade.
I don't know that I would ever advocate for coupling the slab to the ground, because inevitably there's going to be a situation where your slab may be a dew point relative to the humidity in that climate zone. So I think it's better to always, just like, build tight and ventilate right, we should always try and thermally decouple all the surfaces inside the building so that we can control any condensation risk. But if you live in like San Diego, where it's like 73 degrees, 350
Couple away.
out of the week, just like
Yeah,
don't
but
worry about.
I mean, I've been in Austin where Reisinger and I pulled baseboard out and had all mold behind it because the slab was chilling the bottom of the wall and creating condensation. In the air conditioning times, it wasn't heating. So I guess if you ask me that question personally, I'd go to you and ask you, when do you think it would be okay, or what is the reason to couple the slab with the ground?
Well, I guess in a really hot zone where you're controlling your humidity levels in the house.
But in a really hot zone, if I build a really good house, I'm putting in very little air conditioning and I'm getting the conditioned space. Coupling the ground, that 15-degree delta is not helping me out that much. And Ross is going to give you the best answer tomorrow.
So how much insulation?
We do a minimum of 2, but typically 4 inches. And that's pretty standard.
That's what, R10 or R20?
It's probably R12ish on that order, R8 to 12.
You got to keep that slab above the condensing temperature in all weather, or it's going to be a problem. So that's what your baseline should be.
The risk of condensation is going to outweigh the potential energy savings on a very narrow bandwidth of time that happens in the existence of that building throughout the year.
And lastly, the cycling time of a heat pump versus trying to get heat in and out of a 4-inch concrete slab is crazy different, right?
You're saying you're just never going to have
it's just never going to work as
BTUs
quickly
to change
as
that.
flicking the switch and turning the heat pump on.
That's a good question, though. And these are, I see homes built in the southern half of the U.S. without insulation under them often.
If you're doing a house without air conditioning in Santa Fe or something, then we can start talking about why there would be a reason to couple it, dump some heat in there, transfer it to the ground.
Hot, dry climates, yeah.
Then you have an argument. But to just say, let's couple it to help me store. That was Jake and Peter. They don't listen to me when I tell them stop talking about dumb stuff. No. It's a coup to get rid of me between those two. I'm fighting for my life there.
I was on the table saw while I was listening to the podcast, which I normally am, and I'm like, coupling slab. Why haven't I thought of that? That's brilliant. And then I did a little bit of research, and then I was asking you guys.
Peter is subject to the initial forms of dementia that we're trying to keep it quiet, but.
And just because they have a podcast doesn't mean they know what they're talking about.
That I will attest to.
You're a good example of that. The only case where anything ground coupled in my world makes sense is like doing ground coupled preheat loops for ERVs in very cold climates where you're trying to preheat the incoming air to keep it from
Those
freezing
turn out to be a moldy
up.
mess too, right?
They're what?
They turn out to be a moldy mess too.
Well, he's talking about with liquid.
Yeah, like closed, like all loops, not earth tubes. You missed my presentation.
I saw your earth tubes thing, and I was like, I'm glad we're gotten rid of that.
But it's still on GBA like every week.
Let me talk to someone about that.
You want to defend yourself, Jake? No? Perfect. All right, who else has a question out there for these guys? There you go, right over here.
Is there a good starting place to bridge some builders that aren't quite on board yet with stretch code and building beyond a 2x6 with R19?
Yeah, I got a suggestion. Fine Home Building, Green Building Advisor are great places to start. And admittedly, I have a vested interest in saying that to you, but I wouldn't say that if I didn't really believe that it was a great starting point.
JLC, Build
JLC
Show
too.
Network.
There's 1,000 details on Green Building Advisor that are exceptional.
Best drawn details
That would mean
ever.
they actually look at the drawings before they built it.
I would say in your own personal business, moving from doing things code built or run of the mill or the way we've always done it and moving forward, you don't have to sell it to people the first few times. Understand it yourself. Choose to take I hate giving this level of advice. Choose to make a little bit less money on one to upgrade something yourself. And then you have the understanding of how that works and the benefit of it, and then you can sell it to the next client. We didn't jump to where we are today right off the bat. We sold zip to somebody because we were worried about air. And then we sold exterior insulation to somebody because we were worried about thermal. And then we were worried about what kind of windows we should use. And we went to a triple glaze. Like, this is a 10-year evolution. So it's small chunks. And the biggest piece of advice I could give to anybody looking to change the way they build, stop giving good, better, best. Just say, this is the way we're supposed to do it. This is the way we're going to do it.
To that point, we don't VE or allow negotiations around our building envelope. But the lowest hanging fruit for improvement is air control. So the best thing you can do to step your building up is to figure out how to make it more airtight.
And,
That way
and
you
I'll
guys
close it with, don't ever build the same house twice.
Or if you build it twice, make sure the second one's better than the first one.
That's my point, is make a change. It could be, hey, we'll just strive to get a little better air tightness, or we'll manage water a little better, or we'll do a better window flashing detail.
What I like about these building science symposiums is that they kind of triage the control layers. Am I right, guys? Water, air, thermal, moisture. I heard today that there was some contention on how. Did you like how I mentioned that, Jake? But anyway, you got to get the water and keep it out of the building first. You got to make the air so you have a determined interior and exterior. The in-between spaces of crawl spaces and attics that are unconditioned are the problems, right? So focus on the in-between spaces, focus on making good water control layers and air control layers, and I think you're a lot of the way there. I really do.
You know, if I could add a question to what he was asking too, is there's wanting to get involved in this, but then there's also how do you get the buy-in from the trades? Because he's not out there doing it by himself. This is something you built all over the country, Steve. How do you take it? How do you take it to the next level? Threats?
I asked Jake this during a presentation. I'm guessing it was another building science symposium. And what did you say, Jake?
It takes time. It's
and
not
pay
easy.
them is what
And
I remember you
have
saying. You
convince
pay
them
them
to do it the right way, and sometimes that convincing is just saying, what is it going to take? What is the budget to do it the way that I want to do it? And we're going to bid it that way, and I'm going to include your number so that from the beginning you have the amount of money allowed to do what I'm asking you to do.
So, in 30 years working with the subs and general contractors, I've come to know this. The very best subcontractors and contractors that I've worked with will simply sit at the table, and if the homeowner makes a change or such, they'll simply say, yeah, let me get a number to you, and if you want to make that decision, we'll go in that direction. The ones that hem and haw, roll their eyes, say that's a dumb idea, fight it, their quality of work is very, very rarely as good as the guy that just sits there and says, I'll get you a number. If that's the way you want to do it, we'll do it that way. Let me get you a number.
I lean on our architects and design professionals to make sure they have drawings of what my expectations are for the building, because then there's a contractual tie to their scope of work that they have to execute that set of drawings and those details included in that set.
Perfect. And what do you do for work? You're an architect. All right, great. Great. Do we know any other architects up here?
Never miss an opportunity.
Yeah. All right, who else has a question that they want to ask the panel up here? Anybody?
Where's Victor?
Burning, itching, building something.
Victor, what's your question? Go to Victor. Victor had a question.
Where's Vic?
He said he saved it for
antibiotics for
that. It was just on that vented roof that you showed, where on the monoslope or whatever it's called, where you have the vents coming up on the bottom on the lower section, and then on the ridge, the vent it's also at the bottom. And my question was just, if that is still sufficient for that ventilation to go up and then back down on that peak.
You're venting the high side of the pitch through the soffit vents of the uphill of the slope.
So I think that even the upper section of that roof is still just a 112. That's still higher than the low side. The little bit of air.
That has a loop at the top. It still vents just because it turns down for the last.
You want a microphone, Steve? We got a microphone. So
No, you guys were hogging it. I went a cappella.
Now answer the question.
So I was just saying, it's no different than a vent pipe that you turn and have a small loop to. That is much higher than the soffit vent, so it's going to bleed out.
Do you buy that, Kohta?
Yeah, sure.
Like,
I always look for the Kohta nod.
this is to steal a John Straub quote. This is where we're measuring mouse farts. Like, theoretically, there could be a risk of like some pocketing of moisture in that area there that could cause an issue. But we forget to give buildings credit on how resilient they are on dealing with stupid shit.
And the other thing that we always forget to say in these occurrences is it might be a higher risk. It doesn't mean that it is going to have a problem. So it's all gradient. Yeah.
And you can also, there's, sheet metal details for venting the top edge at the eave edge to do that.
And most building assemblies, for the most part, are generously in favor of success. So if that vent, say, only vented 80%, it probably only needs to vent 60% to be successful.
All right, thank you for that. Who else has a question out there? There you go. Dave from Mitsubishi.
Thank you, Dave. All right, this is a question for the collective up there. So, as we progress into the future, we're going to need the workforce to be competent, skilled, and knowledgeable of these skill sets that you guys have already started, all right? So my question is, how do we attract the younger generation into the passion and the volume of what's going to be needed and the demand for electrification that's starting to happen now? And building science plays into all this. What's your opinion on how do we attract that next level of workforce?
I'll give you this in a second, Patrick.
These guys aren't the answer to attraction, believe me. Okay? They're about as far from attraction as you get.
And that's why I have to work really hard on learning about flashings and waters and stuff like that in order to feed my family. The problem is, and this question comes back to, for me, to a cultural question. What's happened is we have highly undervalued skilled trades in our country and been sold that college is the only answer to success. Okay? So what we need to do is we need to figure out how to elevate the trades. Countries like Japan hold carpenters at the same level as doctors because they understand that everybody needs health and they need housing. We've lost that in our country. So the short-term way to get us there is to figure out how we can pay these people more and give them benefits that are commensurate with other industries that we're competing against. Because right now we can go and get a job at Starbucks and work part-time and get health benefits and $20 an hour, but I can go bust my ass on a framing crew and get $20 an hour and no benefits. So what we need to do is we need to raise that bar so that we're on an equal footing here.
So, I agree with you, of course. But I also think, because, when I was growing up, there was sharp class. I had every neighbor working on every decrepit vehicle and house in my neighborhood. You got to see people working on stuff. And you can love your job, but how do you know you love something if you've never tried it? So I think...
You don't even get the opportunity to see it in our schools anymore.
See it. So we need to do a better job of showing kids, young people, people who have second careers, the amazing ways you can do very important work and love it. And, that's my new mission, is because the work is important. The work is satisfying. The work is rewarding. But you have to be exposed to it, I think, at a young age.
We're going to end up in a situation where we're going to have no plumbers, and people are going to have a clogged toilet, and they're going to have to go on Amazon and pay $1,100 to get somebody to show up in 3 days to unclog their toilet. And now maybe we'll hopefully pay attention to how important these people are to our society.
We should have a mandatory 10-year warranty on everything we build.
I'm game.
Right? Because if you did that, builders would have to actually build. It would take all the gypsies out of the picture that undercut good builders and say, I could build that for $175 a square foot. Right? We get rid of all of them. You can pay the employees a fair wage. All the subs can get paid a fair wage, and we start building good houses. And the clients have to pay the price.
We had a trip to Switzerland when we went over with Sega recently, and we were in a panelized factory over there where they're building basically passive house panelized buildings. And I pulled the shop manager aside, and I'm like, well, this is great. You guys have these, high performance building assemblies, but how many people actually choose these? And he looks at me kind of confused. He's like, what are you asking me? I'm like, how many people choose to build this level of performance? And he goes, everybody. He's like, residential, commercial, and industrial are all net zero across the board. Because they understand that it makes sense to the longevity of the housing stock, to the energy consumption, to the national security, to the environmental aspects, all of these things. When you look at it, it makes sense. But the problem is we're being force-fed cheap oil and gas right now in this country, and they're trying to, keep selling us oil and gas.
I think that folks who are new to the industry realize the important work that needs to be done. And we need to remind them that they are not just a 9-to-5 ticket punching employee. They are doing the important work of housing, which, people worldwide die every day of lack of shelter. And we need to recognize that the people that provide that for all of us are doing amazing work, and it's very important.
Okay, I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but we have 4 employees under the age of 21, 3 of which did not grow up in construction households. We're reaching out beyond the world of, hey, Mr. Plumber, does your kid need a job for the summer? Because we know he doesn't want to work with you. Maybe it turns into something, maybe it doesn't, but I have a 16-year-old that's working for us right now who's both of his parents are at the university. They're professors. They're never going to push their kid. I know them. They're never going to push their kid to go into construction. We're 3 weeks or 4 weeks into the summer, and he comes to the office every morning excited and early, and he's telling his friends, and his friends want to come and work with us. That doesn't happen if I'm just going, putting an ad in the paper or something. I found a kid that I knew through somebody else and said, hey, do you want to quit working at McDonald's this summer and make more money per hour and get to be outside and hang out with us? And he was like, oh, yeah, sure.
Think of the gift you're giving that kid, Jake, right? That could be a career that you're starting for someone and doing important work.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we have to meet kids where they're at today, right? I mean, they can make money playing Fortnite and games, and right, and here we are, we're outside swinging hammers and what have you. But I do think what's happening, and I'm listening to, what Jake was just saying, and Steve and Patrick and everybody, is there's a bit of a cultural shift happening now too. I think the youth are really starting to look at the trades differently than they have in the past, but I also think that's because of the technology and social media side of this. I think it's a big deal. These guys are on social media all the time, making what they do cool again. And I think that's what we all have to do. And I think, us gray hairs that are out here and people that have been doing this a long time, we have to meet them where they're at. I did say you're cool.
Not much. I'm also going to play devil's advocate here a little bit because I've been in these conversations before. I think the only thing that's really going to move this forward isn't any initiative or outreach or anything like that we do. It's going to be when kids get out of college and they see that their friends in the trade were able to buy a house and have decent vehicles and a relatively good living that's happening, and they then start to understand they got sold a bill of goods.
And you can love it too.
And they love it, and they're stoked. And guess what? They don't have to pay $300 an hour to the plumber because they know how to fix the trap on their sink.
Or they have a friend who's a plumber.
Bingo. And we can do a little trade for weed or something like that.
Ben, I agree with you. And it happens, I'm over here, that you have a platform, and you have a platform, and you have a platform. Why not share what you're making online? Tell them, here's the livelihood I make. Here's the life I can afford. I don't think anybody's really doing that today.
You mean the wages?
Well, you only have to share what you declare.
IRS. Over here, let me. Diversity. Support diversity in the trades. Yeah, we do need more diversity in the trades. Yeah. We need more women. We need more diversity all the way around. Today we have the tools for everybody to participate. And, I don't think there's a reason that we shouldn't have more women or diversity in the trades. I think we need to do a better job of promoting that we want that.
The issue that we run into is that we cast the net out and we get in a bunch of people sending us their resumes, and 95% of them are middle-aged white men. What are our choices? What are our choices? I don't know. We make it something attractive. Colbert, when I worked for him up in Maine, 50% of our crew were women. Like, I don't know how Dan did it, but we had that ability. And what I can tell you is that I would much rather work on a crew that's 50% women than all men. They bring a sensibility to it. And I think we've just been so stuck in the thought that, it's a white male sport that we haven't taken the time to look and say, oh shit, we may be better off if we open our blinders a little bit. So, that being said, if anybody can help me get anybody other than middle-aged white men to apply for our jobs, I'm happy to hear it.
All right, so we're going to move on from that conference, unless you got a comment on that?
No, I have a question though, because I really feel that this entire event promotes our industry and about the youth. So what can everybody in this room do to promote our tech schools, technology, and everything else that we need to invoke these young people to want to be more a part of what we're doing?
Go to your school board meetings. So many school board meetings are populated by wackos, right? So tell them the programs you want. Tell them the programs we need as a country. And that education happens on a local level, right? So if you want trade schools in your school, you're going to have to advocate for that. You're going to have to show that there's a need in the community and that there are students who are willing to take up those programs. In Connecticut, the technical education schools are full. They cannot handle as many students as want to get in. And I don't think that's a bad problem, because for so long the trades were seen as a dumping ground for mediocre students, for students who were violent or had other problems. We need to change that. We need smart people doing this work, because it's not easy and it's important.
But even with those trade schools full, that's not anywhere near meeting the demand of what we need in the industry.
I think we all try to look at these problems as like a national or a regional scale, make a difference on your level. I called the vocational school in my home district that has 300 kids in the construction program, and I asked the teacher if he had anybody that he might say, hey, you should talk to this kid, they might go into this. And his response was, you don't want any of these kids, they're all criminals. I called the principal of the school and had a conversation with the principal about, if this is the way your teacher views their students, there's absolutely no way that they can be doing a good job to serve those students. And there's absolutely no way all 300 kids are criminals and you don't want them. That's a perception of who that guy is teaching, and trying to make a change and trying to say to the administration of the school, like, hey, you gotta.
And also, if you've spent any time around construction, probably half of them are criminals too, and they're phenomenal construction workers. So I got no problems hiring criminals.
But I think that we all have a tendency to get caught up in this as like, this is a larger problem than we can have any impact. You can have an impact in your neighborhood and make a difference.
Especially with local schools, right? They listen to parents.
Let's go, one more.
If I may, just one thing. Like, I sit on the board of directors for 3 trade schools, right? I'm a builder just like you guys. The reality is this: we all had mentors. We all will have mentors. We're the ones that make the difference. And if we take the time now, we'll impact those lives forever.
100%. Just real quick, and I'm going to go to your question in a second. How many people in here are under the age of 30? Raise your hands. Steve, put your hand down. Times 2.
That didn't mean to laugh.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of us in here. And how do you feel?
Under 30.
Under 30. But I think that's exactly it. And I think the mentorship program, Jake, you're doing it on your job sites. The kids are coming back and they want to work. But that's something that we all have to do out here. You got to meet them where they're at, and we got to show them how to do it. At the old school days, at least, maybe on other job sites, not Jake's, about falling through or breaking something, you owe me a case of beer. Does that still exist? And it doesn't, right? And I think that's part of it. And I think we got to take the fear out of that. And I do think that everybody out here has that opportunity to be a mentor. And if you are part of a trade school, we should come up with a program when we have these events that we can invite them. And they can help out, and they can listen, and they can all be part of what we're doing here. So let me go over here and get this question.
Dave touched on it. Just like, be nice to your junior employees. Just don't be a jerk. It was pretty abusive when I was coming up through the ranks, and that's not a comfortable place. Just be nice to them. Teach them. Don't be abusive.
So going off what you guys were saying, I'm part of that younger generation, and a lot of kids and peers my age are concerned about work-life balance. What would you say to someone who's looking in entering the trades or professions, who's concerned about that kind of work-life balance? Because normally you hear, 10, 12-hour days, even all-nighters for things like architecture, etc.
It's hard work. Like, there's no two ways about it. And to some degree, you have to pay your dues, and this goes for any career. You have to put in those hours, those long days, those over-the-hump moments in order to get yourself in a position where you can have that kind of anonymity or whatever it is, however you want to look at it. So everybody has to put in those hours.
I would note that I have a cousin who is an oncologist that works 65 hours a week. It's not our trade. It's how you approach your career. It's how you approach your job.
It's capitalism.
Before we moved to also competing in the Kansas City market when we were just in Columbia, I was a 4-day-a-week employee. So it was actually 3 of my project managers were too, until recently when they decided it would be easier to do shorter days than 5 days a week.
And
It's
tell
not
those folks
70 hours for everybody.
Tell those folks who want to work a shorter day, do a better job, right?
What do you do now? Say it one more time. Architecture. Got it. So you're an architect? Not licensed yet. Right?
How many hours a week you work?
Give or take a couple hours. 40. Did you say 40 hours? Yeah. Full time. Perfect.
And I take up a substantial chunk of that, or at least I try to.
Yeah. How many people sitting out here like this conversation and really think it's valuable to how we're going to move forward? How many people here are having a hard time, even retiring because they don't have somebody to take over their business? Right. I mean, it's the real deal, right? Nobody wants to build something their whole life and then not have somebody pass it to them. Sure. All right. Do we have a few more minutes left? Do we have any other questions?
Do you feel that there is a regional gap as far as the good construction? I come from South Florida, and I understood what Patrick was saying, that construction is like the job of last resort. For the longest, even up until now, that's how it is. And when I came here to the Northeast, I see that construction is, it's more thought of and intentional, and the building is better than, and I'm not saying it's every builder in South Florida, I just haven't encountered the best builders. And I've worked with builders who build, multi-million-dollar homes, and even those companies, I understand about you could make more money in the trades, and I see that here, but still in South Florida, I see that even the subs, the pay is just not there, and so it still equates to the job of last resort, because though they are doing a trade, the owners themselves maybe are not, making. I don't know where the gap is.
The challenge is they need to find the right folks to work for, and it's going to be harder in certain parts of the country, right? Because so much of real estate is driven by what you can get a mortgage for, and which creates a race to the bottom situation. So you got to find someone who's building good homes for people who care or want a good house, or builders who want to do a good job, because that is not your normal client. Your normal client wants X number of square feet with X number of bedrooms and X number of bathrooms for X number of dollars. Well, that's
with the stainless steel and the granite.
That's going to create a challenge for people who have to make a living doing it. So, maybe you want a smaller house built better. And that's a bigger problem for all of us, is to change the real estate market, which we're probably not going to do here, but these are things we need to talk to young people about. When you're choosing who do you want to work for, what are they giving you? What are they doing for you? What can you learn? And that's a hard thing to say when you're working a 9-to-5 job and you just need to support your family or yourself, but I feel very blessed because I've always learned from the places where I've worked, and I think you got to pick the right place to fulfill your needs and do more than just punching a clock.
And to Patrick's point, don't be afraid to move around as a young tradesperson. I bounced from interest to interest to interest in the industry as I was coming up in my 20s, because I would do trim carpentry, and then I got really interested in cabinetry. So I went and did a number of years doing high-end cabinetry, and then I got interested in this. Like, it's a worker's market right now where there is plenty of jobs to go around, so you can kind of be selective. The Northeast is also a bit of an anomaly because we have a strong heritage of craftsmanship and quality building. So to use that as a litmus test for the rest of the country is kind of unfair. I wish that the rest of the country built to some of the levels that we do here, but sadly it's not the economics of the situation.
All right, so do you guys ever see the cost of entry to get into the trades? You know, plumbers have to go through,
Years of schooling.
Years of schooling. Electricians need to go through years of schooling. Carpenters, home builders, especially in Connecticut. I think when I signed up to be a home builder, it was $135, and
$267, and you're a home builder.
Much higher bar now, Dave.
Right.
It's double that.
So, and Ben, you were talking earlier, about our trip to Europe and all that. I mean, it's a very unique training program. The folks in Europe, the kids, the youth, they're put on a path. I mean, it's 4 years of school, then it's 4 years of apprenticeship. And if you ask any carpenter in their school what the hardest thing is, they say, don't do it unless you know math. And they're also taught business. That's a big thing that we lack, is understanding the business of being a builder and a contractor. And that comes back to some of the comments you were talking about. The entry level to get into this and then hire people, and then we're always bidding on low cost. That's what everybody thinks. We're bidding on low cost when it should be the other way around, right? We should be bidding on what the quality it is of what you want to build is, and take it from there.
You don't go into the shoe store saying, I want the cheapest pair of shoes, am I right?
Yeah, 100%. Great. All right, any other questions? Back here.
Well, just to thank you to the panel members and the people that helped put this on. This is absolutely fantastic. I could not agree more about respecting employees. I was a former employer in this industry, and you get what you grow. But to end it on a lighter note, the slabless floor, qualitatively, how does that feel?
We call it an insulation slab.
How does that feel? Under the underfoot, does it feel different in the middle of the room?
Your knees will actually thank you versus on a concrete slab.
Oh, well, no, concrete slab is right out the door. Just, maybe versus a TJI and 3/4 Advantech, decent quality floor.
So I don't think anybody would know that it's anything other than a slab from, does it feel like it's giving necessarily? It feels softer like a wood frame floor. So far that house is 4 years old. 5 years old, and we've had no movement throughout the entire building. I was back in the last 6 months, and there wasn't even anything that needed caulking and touch-up. So it's incredibly stable. We're not concerned with it. We'd do it again.
I actually find them to feel more solid underfoot than a wood frame floor. Most wood frame floors, because you get bounce in a wood frame floor.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you don't get that in a slabless floor or whatever you want.
I've always spec'd to try to get that bounce to pretty tight, but the concrete thing I knew was just
that's one of my old anecdotal tests is you stand in the middle of the floor span and you have somebody jump next to you and you feel what happened.
Yeah. Okay.
You don't get that bounce in a slabless floor. You feel the impact,
slab.
but not the insulation slab.
Okay.
Insulation slabs. So we have concrete slabs, we have insulation slabs. Concrete slab is poor descriptor, I would say. Let's have more elegant descriptive language. Insulation slab. Did we just? Steve's.
Can we just call it a floor? It's a floor.
Great. Well, listen, everybody, that's going to wrap it up for today's conversation. Can we get a round of applause for all of our panelists, please? Right? Yeah. And excellent. How many of you out there are enjoying the Two Roads Brew? Is it good? How awesome is this space? It's good, isn't it? Yeah, perfect. All right, well, listen, I know you got plenty more beer to drink, so we encourage you to hang around and talk and network. The more we talk, the better we're all going to be, so let's keep doing that. Also, tomorrow morning, if you could be here by 8:30, it would help us out quite a bit. It starts at 8:55, but you know us, we like to be early. So everybody have a great afternoon and a great evening. Thanks for coming.
Thanks very much for coming.
Hi, Mom.